Bad Batch Season 2 has finally dropped, and we need to break down the first two episodes, so let's get straight into it. We begin with the first episode, The Spoils of War, and we find Clone Force 99 being chased by a group of angry giant crabs. And it's pretty evident by the new designs of their armor that some time has passed since Season 1. We see Omega reading her datapad, and on it we can see some schematics of the V-Wing, a very common Republic-era fighter that has been and still is heavily featured in this show. We then learned that the reason why Omega was looking at this is because Tech has assigned her homework, indicating that throughout all this time she has been learning under the tutelage of all the Bad Batch members. And it soon becomes evident that ships are not all that she has been studying. Her combat skills are far more proficient than when we first met her in Season 1, especially with the energy bow. And as the episode progresses, we do get the feel of a classic action movie. The Bad Batch return to their base of operations, and we are then reintroduced to this droid AZ. AZ was first introduced to the Bad Batch back in Season 1 as a medic droid on Kamino, but the droid has actually had a much longer history with the clones, also featuring and helping Five's investigation of the Sith plot that installed inhibitor chips within the brains of the clones. But as we see in the scene, AZ has now been repurposed to a serving droid. Taking a closer look at the table in front of him, we can see two patrons playing a game of the Joric, a game which was first shown back in A New Hope and something which we learned in Season 1 that Omega was extremely talented in playing. The crew meet up with Sid and we are introduced to a new character by the name of Fee, who also happens to be a pirate. Fee makes a rude remark about the dissimilar appearance of the clones and chalks it down to bad quality control, but this moment really serves a reminder that despite the clones no longer fighting in a war or serving the Empire, it's still pretty difficult for them to fit into everyday life. While Fee's remarks about them are mild by comparison, there are those in the galaxy who might still shun the existence of these clones, seeing them as nothing more than property or objects, as Fee seems to suggest here. And what this moment is really hinting at is the theme of clones needing to stick together, something which I am sure will be further explored down the line. In the background, we can also see a Mandalorian helmet and a clone pilot helmet, the very same ones that we saw back in Season 1. We then learn that Fee has provided some crucial information for the Bad Batch's next mission, a mission that will take them to Sereno, Dooku's home world. We then learn that the Empire is pillaging Dooku's war chest, but Hunter is skeptical and doesn't really want to take the risk. In the next shot, we see Omega continuing her studies and Hunter quizzes her on the difference between a Lambda and Delta class shuttle. A Lambda class shuttle usually refers to the line of ships most often used by Imperial officers and to occasionally move troops around. The Delta class shuttle likely refers to the escort shuttle, the very same one used by the Bad Batch, or a T3C shuttle, a newer variant of the Delta used by the likes of Krennic. So it's easy to see why some people might be unable to distinguish the difference between the two classes, especially given how both designs involve a ship with 3 wings. Sid tries to convince Hunter about the job, stating that the amount of credits they would earn would allow them to buy their own freedom, but Hunter thinks that they are already free, something which Sid disagrees with, pointing out that it's only a matter of time before the iron grip of the Empire finds them too. But with enough credits, the team would have enough to disappear, and this moment does draw some parallels with the Andor show, with Cassian, at least in the beginning, believing that he too could escape the grip of the Empire if he ran far enough. But as we know, this most certainly won't work. Nonetheless, Hunter is persuaded by the promise of being able to provide a better life for Omega, and the team then embark on the mission. On the way to Sereno, Echo speaks to Hunter about his motivations behind the mission and urges him to reconsider the use of the war chest for bigger efforts, hinting at his support for a rebellion against the Empire. Echo points out that Omega is the reason for why they are the way they are, but not really blaming her for it. Instead, he points out what we have all been thinking about since the very start. What about the other clones? So far, up until now, Hunter has been quite reluctant to engage with this idea of freeing other clones, preferring to stick with taking care of his immediate team. And a lot of this has to do with the characterization of Clone Force 99, The idea that they are a group of misfits even within the clone army and at times treated as freaks by their own regular brothers may have also caused Hunter to somewhat disassociate himself from the rest of the clones, save the member of the Bad Batch. But Echo, on the other hand, comes from a regular background, having served alongside many normal clones, all of which he considers to be his brothers, which really explains why he is far more compassionate and willing to go help clones outside of the Bad Batch, impressing the need to do more to help other clones who are suffering and being exploited by the Empire. However, this entire conversation is overheard by Omega, who has a slightly different interpretation about the conversation, as we will see later on. The team land on Sereno and we find a destroyed city, and parallels are drawn between this city and Camino, as both were destroyed by Imperial orbital bombardment. The team find the war chest guarded by more clones and move in to acquire the cargo. The clones led by Wilco soon find out that one of their own is missing, due to Wrecker knocking him out earlier. The Bad Batch realize this and trigger a diversion, but while the episode does show us how competent and capable the Bad Batch are, it also goes out of its way to not diminish the competence of the regular clones. Wilco quickly catches on what the thieves might be up to and acts accordingly, demonstrating how much more efficient clones are at their job compared to their stormtrooper successors. Wilco's quick thinking causes half the team to be trapped and the whole plan goes awry. Hunter and Wrecker end up in Dooku's private chambers, a location that we have previously seen in the Clone Wars, and although the regular clones are competent, it also becomes clear that in terms of combat, they are definitely outclassed. Despite Wilco's excellent decision-making skills, such as to launch the ship early and to eject the escape pods, the Bad Batch are not only better fighters, but also far more creative and spontaneous. A real testimony to their adaptive ability. Omega gets a bright idea, allowing half the team to return back to Sereno, and moving on to Episode 2, Ruins of War, Omega and half the team crash land, and in the process, a lone crate ends up fracturing Tech's femur. Under normal circumstances, such an accident would have completely shattered his leg, so perhaps his clone armor did give him some sort of protection. We then get a scene where Wilco is still on the trail, and we get a sense of how much of a competent captain he is, the sort of competency that kinda makes you wanna like him. Omega and half the team manage to get out the cargo crate, but then it becomes pretty clear that Omega is pretty focused on trying to recover the war chest, for reasons that we will learn later. They find a stranger spying on them by the name of Romar Abdel. Romar leads them to his home, and we then learn that part of the war chest was sourced from Dooku's exploitation of his own people. Throughout Omega's interaction with the old man gives her a small device containing an optical illusion, which is where she starts to learn about what it's like being a child. And it's also an acute reminder that while the rest of the team care for Omega, none of them really know what it's like to be a child or have a proper childhood. As the rest of them were given rapid aging to prepare them for war and spent most of their young days training for it, none of them can really empathize or teach Omega what it's like to be a child, something which the old man clearly recognizes. We then get a powerful moment between the old man and Tech, as Tech inquires about a device which he thinks contains the history and data records of the Separatists, to which the old man corrects him that it's actually Serenian, that Sereno existed well before the Separatists ever did, something which Tech admits that he has never really considered before. And again, the scene really just reflects the tragedy of the clones, that in the short years that they have existed, all they have ever experienced is war. They know very little outside of war and what it's like in times of peace. And in this sense, it also means that much like Omega, the rest of the team are still like children in a certain way. Despite their appearances as adults, they have very little experience and way of knowing outside what they were bred for. The fact that these clones were only given knowledge about who they are fighting for and who is their enemy and nothing else is again another painful reminder that these clones were never intended to exist outside a war. There was no plan to help those clones transition out of war times, and certainly no plan to allow them to exist outside of one, which may or may not foreshadow something ominous to come, but that's another video for another time. Omega decides to split, and Hunter and Wrecker attempt to figure out a way to lose Wilco and his clones. The two find some abandoned separatist tanks but soon discover that none of it works. Wilco and his clones eventually find them, and once again, the only reason why Wrecker and Hunter make it out is because of their ability to improvise on the spot. Tech helps fix the old man's machine, and although it's a small moment, it just may be the first moment in Tech's life where he puts his skill to use that isn't related to war or destruction, but instead to help others heal or recover what they have lost. A short but fantastic moment that may end up being a crucial piece in Tech's character development. Echo and Tech deduce that Omega has left to get the war chest. There is then a bit of a back and forth as the Bad Batch try to get out of Sereno, and we briefly get to see an E-Web blaster, the same sort that we first saw in Empire Strikes Back. We then learn that Omega is desperate to get the war chest due to feeling guilty of preventing the Bad Batch from having a normal life, but ultimately Echo convinces her to let it go. The team finally manage to escape with the help of the old man, and Echo and Omega have a heart-to-heart moment. Echo clarifies to Omega about what he meant by his comments, and we cut to Admiral Rampart having a conversation with Wilco, and he learns that the Bad Batch aren't dead after all. But we in turn also learn that Rampart is eager for the report on the incident to be covered up out of fear that Tarkin may find out, giving us a taste of Imperial military politics. But Wilco, being the honorable man, refuses, which ultimately costs him his life. And the ruthlessness of Rampart just goes to show how far he's willing to go to protect his career. At the same time, it also shows Rampart's general disregard for clone life, treating them as tools to be discarded once they become useless. It might just also highlight the Empire's mistreatment towards the clones as well, a mistreatment that just might boil over to a clone rebellion. So that's all for this breakdown. I have to say this was a very character-driven 2 episodes. The animation and soundtrack were awesome, and I honestly can't wait for more. Anyways, that's all for this video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I am the Lost Acolyte,
and I have spoken.